Vivekanadan. I'm the convener of the National Coastal Protection Campaign, which is a kind of network of fishermen associations, environmental groups, NGOs working on the coast, and some individuals concerned about the health of the coast. So that is the network I sort of represent here. Regarding the CRZ, Coastal Regulation Zone notification, of course, as all of us know, it came out in 1991, and it took some time to really understand it, because initially it was seen as a bit of a nuisance, including by the fishing community, because it looked as if even their own dwellings on the coast would be affected. Putting up new dwellings, it seemed to regulate a lot of things that may affect their own lives and livelihood. But soon after, we found that the CRZ was the only instrument we had for the new type of developments that were coming on the coast. It's only from the mid-90s onwards you started having this new invasion of the coast. Earlier it was a small incremental process. Here and there would have been some tourist resorts, some power plant, something. But now it's becoming a regular affair across the entire coast, a wide range of actors moving in. And by mid-90s we realized that the CRZ is the only instrument available to fight that. So it's from that time around that actually the CRZ was accepted, at least by the leadership, the enlightened sections of the leadership in the fishing community, as actually a useful instrument. Though it had some defects in terms of even regulating dwellings of fishermen who had nowhere else to go. So we decided to live with that at one level. Another level, use it to protect the coast from the invasion. But of course, as we all know, that the CRZ 1991 was amended finally around 25 times and kept on dilution. The original principles, if you look, which are still very, very important, is you should not start an activity on a coast, or you should not be permitted to do something on the coast which is within 500 meters from the high tide line and the intertidal zone, and some of the, let's say, water bodies that are influenced by tide. That is the whole CRZ originally. That CRZ, you should not be permitted to do something unless that activity really needs the coast. So that is one clear criteria. So that has been consistently diluted. Activities which have no reason to be on the coast, which could be anywhere, including airfields, airports, are being excluded through various amendments. So they had diluted this fundamental principle. Second is, okay, you need the coast, your activity needs the coast, but can the coast actually bear you? Does it have the capacity to absorb your presence? Now that is where a lot of issues come up, So there are also a number of provisions dealing with that in the CRZ. But anyway, it was badly diluted, and it was becoming increasingly, I think the CRZ notification coincided with the, it's just a coincidence, with the opening up of the Indian economy, 91. But the CRZ is the result of a different process starting from the 80s, which had a very strong environmental protection logic. But the 90s was the open economy, and by the time the economy opened up and its impacts could start, can start feeling it's only by mid-90s. Then onwards, the industry and various actors have been trying to dilute that. So that's been the. So in 2007, I think, and you see, the 1991 notifications, another flaw was this whole fisherman issue. The needs of the fishing community for their own regular dwelling and living there, livelihood requirements, were not properly considered. It was entirely a ecological or environmental notification without looking into the livelihoods. But even then, fishermen were the biggest champions of that, because for them this is the only instrument available. So what happened in the 2000s was this attempt of, they were finding that even this dilution is not good enough. They wanted to make a wholesale change and called it Coastal Management Zone, CMZ. So in the from 2005 onwards, there was this attempt to bring in a new act, which, even though it is couched in very good language, was essentially would lead to complete dilution. So I think that is when the fishing community woke up and en masse protested. So 2008 was a series of coastal protests, and that had its impact in a number of ways. One, I think suddenly the recognition that the fishing community is probably the most important stakeholder on the coast, and for environmental ministry as well as for environmental groups, their support is going to be the most crucial for any kind of protection of the coast. I think that was a fundamental change and a recognition that the fishing community received through that process. And then started the negotiation for a new notification, improved notification, because we said no to CMZ, but we are okay with an improved CRZ. That negotiation went on, drawn out. 2011, that is what came up. I would say that it is still flawed in many ways, because many of the dilutions done in the 1991, those 25 amendments have not been rolled back. They have not been rolled back. So to that extent, it still remains a sore point. But on the other hand, a number of new progressive elements have entered. And there is now very clear recognition of the importance of the fishing community in many things. And instead of treating fishing communities as a problem on the coast, now it is clearly recognized that their living on the coast should not be seen as an issue. Their legitimate needs for housing and livelihood is more or less, I would say, not perfectly taken care of in this new notification. And there are a number of progressive elements, including representation of fishing communities at some district levels. And there is now the new coastal zone management plans have to be made to replace the old ones made in '96. And these plans now, the guidelines very clearly specify mapping of a fishing village. Earlier, the existence of the fishing village on the coast or fishing communities on the coast was rarely recognized, and many of the EIAs got away with the projects which said there's no commercial fishing in the zone, there's hardly anybody there, these kind of loose statement. Now we are trying to show that fishing community is there, the spaces they use, not just their houses, just the construction. They use a lot of common space for drying fish, for berthing boats, a variety of socio-cultural, economic needs. All that now, at least the guidelines say, have to be now recorded. So there are a number of useful elements added into it, while there still remain a number of, let's say, old flaws still are continuing. And so it's now we are a little bit looking at it as, okay, let's make the best use of this, but keep fighting for plugging these loopholes and improving the...
If I was to ask you for specific examples of where there have been flouting of CRZ rules, both the old rules and the new rules, and how they have actually affected fishers and the families and the Americans.
I think what has basically happened in the last 15 years, definitely in the last 10 years, is large number of port projects and thermal power plants. I think these two would now top the list perhaps of the most problematic projects on the coast. The privatization of many of these things mean that now there is any number of people can enter, and without having some cap, you find that every industry would like to have a captive port or a jetty for its own work. And there's such a need for felt need, or there is a perceived need for power, that everywhere power plants are coming up, because it is now very clear that where you need a lot of water for cooling, the sea looks infinite, sea water looks infinite, so why not put it on the coast? So there's this invasion on the coast, and the CRZ limitation so far, which is still carried on, the unwillingness to look at cumulative impacts. So you look at, looking at each project as a standalone project, that it is adding to some already what is there, is not recognized. So this means that there are areas in the coast which are now getting very badly affected. Now Kutch district, 60 kilometers handed over to a SEZ and port project, which hardly recognize that there are fishing communities living there, fishing there. Andhra, I think some 450 kilometers of the coast once again sold to private developers and industries for SEZ and things like that. Districts like Nagapattinam in Tamil Nadu, where 10, 15 power plants are going to come in 150 kilometers. So these kind of now, let's say very high concentrations of investment with lot of negative effect on fishing and the coastal health, the erosion, all that is now coming up. Ports, every 20 kilometers they want a port now. So now we've been fighting the new deep sea port coming proposed in Pondicherry. Already the existing port is led to erosion of almost 10-15 kilometers of the coastline. And so these kind of number of effects are now becoming very visible, and we are seriously, in fact, Nagapattinam, one of the power plants that are already come up, you have the local fishermen, because of the hot water pumping perhaps, local fish availability near to their villages decline. So they have to go far in search, both up the coast as well as in deeper water. So they tend to go further north towards Kadalur and fish, and it makes sense for them to go and land in Kadalur. And the locals find these people now becoming, they're becoming a problem for them, and there's a clash. So you can see this is a kind of trigger of a power plant, that communities are fighting among themselves for the scarce resources, leading to conflicts. So it is getting increasingly tougher on the coast. But on the other hand, it is also now created a general awareness that we have to now fight all this.
Beaches are also common land.
Most of the beaches are open, let's say common. They are really commons. But the problem is, in law and on record, what they are is very difficult to know. Communities have used them. The fishing community has been quite free in moving, across the coast and keeping on establishing a new settlement. They have seen this coast as open and for their use. That is how they have traditionally looked at it. Today, suddenly somebody says this area, and any open land on record would be seen as government owned. The government has owned. Now, for instance, the maritime boats, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, now they claim now through whatever mechanism of GOs that have been given, government orders, that the unclassified, all that belongs to them. And they are taking it over for port development and other industrial development. And they are becoming owners of what is actually local commons and trying to even sell it, lease it to industry. For industry, it is throwaway prices. This is how in fact, this property regime, uncertainty of it, and the way state is appropriating what is really local community resources, and then redistributing it in favor of industry and outsiders is another major threat.
You have a lot of port proteins, like you said, but nobody actually looks at the shipping industry like a pollution causes the last one, foreign organisms coming in. So are there any provisions in the Indian law that actually stops ships from polluting and also leading to decline in fishes or like the fishermen?
I think there are some laws as well as international laws, but now the good news is the CRZ 2011 includes 12 kilometers of the sea, 12 nautical miles, sorry, and therefore the territorial. Therefore, in principle now, the CRZ can also start getting into these kind of issues. But I think as of now, if the government is interested, there are, I'm sure, sufficient instruments for them to intervene. In fact, one of the finest environmental audits has been done by the AG's office, Auditors General, CAG. They have picked up Bombay Port Trust and done a very thorough evaluation of their environmental record, and I found it very abysmal. It's up on their website. Of course, no action has been, we do not know what action is being taken, but yes, the problem often is, I think in India, there may be gaps, there's a lot of scope for improvement, new laws. We still have quite a lot. It is just that there is no capacity at civil society level and communities level to actually make sure that they get done, and the government machinery is often quite lax. One, they may not have the capacity because they are not investing in these kind of machinery for enforcement, for instance. They are quite happy to create additional machinery for clearances. So their priorities are different, and only when there is enough public pressure that they start putting money and trying to do that. And quite often many of these states are really speaking in collusion with the investors. They are trying to give a red carpet welcome for the investors. So you can't expect the governments to, at least the senior political figures, to be very serious about enforcement. This is what is happening. So only when the communities wake up and there is sufficient capacity in civil society to counter these things, do real changes come.